Hi, everyone, and welcome to our studio today. I would like to welcome Shawn Schechter, holistic nutritionist. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, nice to meet.
I know for a long time I've asked you and I begged you to come to the show because I really want to learn how to read labels. And
Food labels.
Well, yes, sorry, correct. Food labels. So enlighten us, help us out.
Okay, well, basically I try to give all my clients 3 simple rules that will guide them into making better choices when they visit the supermarket. So the first thing I always tell people is that whenever you're reading a food label, it could be drink, whatever, but anytime you're reading a food label, you have to understand that it's listed in descending order. So from most abundant to least abundant. So I actually brought something today to help out a little bit. So here we have a basic can of whole potatoes, okay? Now, if you go to the back and you read the ingredients, okay, I'm not sure if anybody can see that.
We'll show it on the big screen.
Okay, so the first ingredient is potatoes, okay? Then water, then salt. Okay, so basically that means because potatoes is listed first,
it's got the most in the can is
the most
potatoes.
abundant ingredient is potatoes.
Is the potato.
Okay, and then salt, which is listed last, is the least abundant ingredient. Okay, so let's look here where there's a lot more ingredients. So these are Italian breadcrumbs. Okay, so here if we look ingredients. The first one is toasted breadcrumbs, which you would think, logical,
we know,
right?
yes.
So that's the most abundant. But when this becomes important is when you're looking for things like salt, like sugar, certain fats. And you know that if it's, let's say, salt or sugar is listed as the second, third ingredient, you know that by volume that's one of the most abundant ingredients. So let's say you have something that has 10 ingredients, okay? And salt...
That usually scares me if I see it says something that has 10 ingredients.
We'll get into that in a second, okay? So if you see salt or sugar out of 10 ingredients being the 8th or the 9th ingredient, you know that by volume, it's the least abundant.
Right.
So most people don't know this, and I teach it to all my clients because you can simply look at any food you pull off the shelf, and you can see just by looking at the ingredients, okay, because they're listed from greatest to least amount in the specific food product. This way, at least you know how much of the good stuff, how much of the bad stuff, how much of things that are unnecessary, and how much is there. So I always tell people that's the first rule, to understand that all food labels are listed from most abundant to least abundant.
Okay.
The second guiding principle I give to people, which is what you just mentioned, which I always say, less is better.
Okay.
So here we had simple potatoes, okay? 3 ingredients. That's how it should be.
Okay.
If you pick up a food item, let's say like a can of soup, okay? And in that can of soup, you see there's 25 ingredients. A can of, let's say, chicken soup, tomato soup.
Okay, but a soup can have like vegetables in it that each one is an ingredient.
It can, it can, but it depends, if it's a vegetable soup or if it's, I don't know, clam chowder, you expect to be a little, but I would still say 25 is a little bit, it's a little excessive. It's a little excessive.
Okay.
But generally, you know, because let's say, with this, breadcrumbs. A lot of ingredients for breadcrumbs. Now, it doesn't always mean that it's bad or it's not a good product if there's a lot of ingredients. Of course, you have to look and see what there is. But generally, I tell people less is better. And the third thing that I tell people, which kind of ties into less is better, is if you can't pronounce it, don't buy it.
But I can pronounce most of the stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a lot of, I think, chemicals. That's the way I look at it.
Chemical additives, yeah.
Yeah, and I can pronounce them.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they are.
And the majority of the stuff that you can't pronounce, the majority is usually stuff that you can stay away from. And that's why I always tell people very, very simple rules. First, just understand how the labels work, right? They're from most to least abundant.
Right.
Very most people don't know that. And once you kind of understand that, it becomes a little bit eye-opening, makes it a little bit easier. Again, less is better, right? So you know if there's an exuberant amount of ingredients listed in something,
Don't buy it.
don't buy it. And then on top of that, if you look, okay, there's a lot of ingredients, but let me see what they are, okay? And if you look and it's carrots, it's beets, it's maybe a little bit of salt, a little bit, and it's all stuff that's, is okay, right? Because it's a vegetables, a little bit of seasoning. But as soon as you see the, exorbitant amount of ingredients and in there are a bunch of names that you need a PhD to be able to pronounce, it's usually a sign that to stay away.
Don't buy it.
Don't buy it, yeah.
Don't buy it.
It's becoming a bit of an issue because, a lot of people going to the supermarkets.
But I also heard that, for instance, you have to watch out for the sugar level. But then they're smarter. They get smarter. They hide it under different names.
Well, that's especially true with salt.
Salt too?
Salt,
Okay.
yeah, and I would say not so much with sugar and salt, which those are, today kind of staples of the Western diet. But I would say, although you should always watch those levels, but they tend not to be hidden as much as the chemical additives. A lot of chemical additives, have 3 or 4 different names for the same chemical additive. Why? Because, all of a sudden an article will come out somewhere in the news and all of a sudden it'll start spreading through the internet and it'll get a bad name. So they change the name. Kind of like companies, companies that were involved in scandals or in bankruptcies, what do? They change the name. All of a sudden people think it's a different company. It's the same company, same ownership, but the different name. So I would say that more so is a problem with the chemical additives, more so than it is with salt and sugar. But
how much salt? I just want to know how much salt. What's the salt level that we should
so we have
stay away from?
Something in nutrition we call RDA, the recommended dietary allowance, which is basically based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet. How much you should take in, or how much you should not take in. But with salt, it's a little bit high in my opinion, because they say about 1,000 milligrams a day is an acceptable thing. But 1,000 milligrams a day is about a heaping teaspoon. That's a lot of salt every single day. 365 days a year, you're getting a heaping teaspoon of salt. I think they made that the recommended dietary allowance because they're trying to be realistic.
That there's salt in many things.
It's in everything. Yeah. I mean, people would be surprised to see that you have sodium in drinks, So yeah, it can be a little bit tricky.
And sugar?
Sugar also, unfortunately, has become a staple of the Western diet. Sugar also has to be watched carefully. Sugar, it's kind of varying amounts. But again, it also matters what kind of sugar. Are you talking about white, table sugar? Are you talking about naturally occurring sugars and fruits? I mean, at the end of the day, the body breaks it down very similar. But it kind of has a different effect on the body, whether you're getting fruits, sugars from natural fruits, or sugar that's artifice from sweets and processed foods, fast food, stuff like that. It affects a little bit different. But I would say with sugar, you also have to be careful. It kind of depends. It's not as straightforward as salt, but I would say probably around the same thing, maybe teaspoon to a tablespoon a day, preferably not every day, just with the salt. With salt, which is, they say, about a gram, 1,000 milligrams is about a gram. I usually try to keep people half that, which is not easy, but it's a process. Nothing happens overnight, baby steps. But one thing with sugar, I will say, is that sugar is a stimulant. And actually, studies have been done where they've put the brain under MRI scans. And they've seen now that sugar actually affects the brain in a very similar way to other stimulants like cocaine, like, smoking, like various things. So it's actually a stimulant, sugar, and it actually, it touches and plays with the same brain neurons that a lot of recreational drugs do as well.
Isn't it something? Because I've read somewhere that when you're like, I guess not everybody, but when you're depressed or when you go through certain things, you look and you crave those sweets.
That's true, yeah.
Otherwise, why would our body craves sweet?
So there's another reason, actually.
Okay.
Stress, of course, is one of those things. Stress will make you smoke, stress will make you drink alcohol, stress will make
you go crazy.
Yeah, it'll make you do a lot of things,
yeah.
okay? But another very strong reason that could be happening is something called candidiasis. It's a type of yeast that forms in the gut. Now, a lot of people have problems with this without realizing it. Now, this yeast grows rapidly when you're not eating a proper balanced, diet. Not eating enough fruits and vegetables, too much sugar, too much processed foods, and then this yeast begins to flourish. And now what happens when it begins to flourish? It starts sending signals to the brain, I want sugar. Because that's what they like to rapidly multiply and for their colony to be thriving is sugar. So a lot of times people don't realize when you're getting those late night cravings out of nowhere, sometimes on a full stomach, you ate, an hour or 2 hours ago, you ate dinner and now it's 10, 11 o'clock at night and your body's telling you, give me sugar.
It used to happen to me not anymore.
Yeah.
But it used to happen to me all the time. I used to raid my cupboards for sweet stuff.
It's a lot more common than you might realize. But it's not, a mountain that can't be conquered. It's something that can be dealt with.
Just changing your diet?
Changing your diet, a little bit of willpower, also drinking water, helps because if you're drinking adequate water and your body's hydrated, those cravings are going to be less likely to occur on a regular basis, and the severity will, dissipate over time in terms of, that strong need for those sugars and carbs.
Sweets.
Yeah. So it's, it's a lot more common than a lot of people realize. Yeah. So just to recap, I know we kind of covered a lot of ground here, but I just want to recap the 3 simple rules, or more like tips for people, okay? So 1 is remember that the labels are listed from most abundant to least abundant, okay?
Okay.
If sugar is the first ingredient, then that's
too much sugar in it.
And there are things that are like that out there, and that's the most abundant ingredient. 2 is less is better, okay? You don't want to be grabbing foods that are just packed with an overabundance of ingredients.
And I'll say the 3rd. If you can't pronounce it, don't buy it.
Don't buy it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I always teach my clients, for myself, I've always tried to impart and empower my clients with lifelong knowledge. So they can kind of know these things without having to come to me every 5 minutes with a question about this. So I try to empower them as much as possible. And that's why I think it's important for people to look up some of these chemical names that you can't pronounce. Look them up because most of them are reoccurring. It's if it's in this, then it's in that. If it's in that, then it's in this. So I always tell people, we're living in the future. It's you just pick up the smartphone, type it in, and get some information about it.
I just want to ask a quick question before we move on to another subject. Why do they have a need to put so many chemical ingredients in a can of, I don't know, okay, there's no potato, but in any small can? Why?
It's a great question.
So it looks beautiful, so it would look fresh. Why?
There's a lot of arguments about this, a lot of arguments, and I don't want to get into conspiracy theories or what have you, but the truth is that there is no good reason. Okay? How do we know that there's no good reason, or nothing that seems logical. Are they increasing profits? Not really,
Right.
Is it making the product stay fresher for, a prolonged amount of time? No, not really. And why we know this? Because the same product that's packed full of chemical additives, we can find its counterpart that doesn't have those things. So it kind of goes back several decades in that, but I can just plainly, for a simple answer, there is no good reason.
There's no good reason.
There's no good reason, yeah. Not to mention that study after study has shown that most of these chemical additives are very harmful to human beings. There's no
reason
debate.
for us to consume it.
There's no debate about this. And just before we move on, one quick thing I want to mention is that a really good friend of mine, he's a scientist, and he works actually for the food business, okay? Some big corporations, doesn't matter who, and he actually works in synthesizing and making a lot of these chemical additives. So one day we had a talk at his place of business, and he went through a lot of them. And he was like, yeah, this is known to be safe. Yeah, this is known to be okay for human consumption. And then at the end, he said, yeah, but I won't eat any food that have these things in it. So it was quite comical that the guy who's, in this area was telling us that it's safe, it's okay for human consumption, but he himself won't touch a food that has these things in it.
That tells you.
That's irony for you.
So basically, we should stay away from those.
There's
chemical.
No good reason I can think of that you should not stay away from them.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So let's talk about, because I really wanted to talk to him, and I asked him to talk about this subject about the omega, because I know most of us know omega-3, there's omega-6, but I lately discovered there's also omega-9.
Correct.
And I want to know, just talk to us a little bit about the different omega, and do we really need, to take...
We do.
We do.
So
like
omega...
supplement.
Yeah, supplement, but not necessarily in pill form.
Okay.
Supplement in terms of we have to add them to our daily dietary routine.
Okay, so break it down for me. Omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9.
So first of all, we'll get into omega-9 in a second, okay?
Okay.
But omega-3, okay, also known as ALA, which is alpha-linolenic acid, okay? I'm going to stick to the abbreviations because I want to make it simple for everybody out there, okay? So omega-3, the ALA, is basically what you get from a lot of natural vegetarian forms and that non-meat, okay? Beans, legumes.
Fish?
Not fish.
Not fish.
Not fish, okay? Basically from a vegetarian diet, you get those things.
Okay.
Now, the body converts this ALA into two others. So there's three types of omega-3. You have ALA, DHA, and EPA. Okay. The thing is that, as I said, the ALA, the form of omega-3, you get from basically from vegetables, from nuts and seeds, from beans. But the DHA and EPA is basically found in cold water fatty fish, like salmon, like sardines, like mackerel. Now, our body can take this vegetarian, the ALA, and convert it to this EPA and DHA, but it doesn't do it very efficiently. Okay. And I always tell people, once you hit 40 or 50 years of age, this DHA and EPA becomes very, very important, okay? Which is why I always tell people, if once you hit the age of 50, it's essential that you start adding these cold water fish into your diet, okay? Obviously, it doesn't have to be every day, but somewhat regular basis, at least, let's say, 3 times a month, okay? And you also want to stay away from farmed fish, which is becoming very, very hard, okay? Which are fish that, are stuck in a pond, and that's how they're grown. They're not, wild fish are still the prime choice to make, okay? So that's omega-3, okay? So you can get it, from, like I said, from these things like nuts and seeds and beans and
but legumes. We need the fish as well.
Which is the EPA and DHA, yeah. You need fish, okay? Omega-6 is not really an issue. Very few people are deficient in this nutrient. Mainly, we find it in a lot of vegetable oils. Okay, sunflower, safflower, corn, soy, and 1 teaspoon of vegetable oil gives you everything you need.
Got it.
Okay, so basically omega-3 is the one that we see the deficiency in.
But now, okay, so you said we find them in oils. But I see a movement lately to eat everything with no oil.
No oil.
It's like the no oil diet.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Well, the thing is, there's a difference between something we call cold-pressed oils. So cold-pressed oils are oils, let's say like flaxseed, which is my personal favorite for omega-3 because, 1 tablespoon is enough for 2 people to get all the omega-3 they need in a day. It's about 5 to 7 grams. So 5 to 7,000 milligrams per tablespoon. It's unbelievable.
So, I mean, if somebody takes a teaspoon of flax oil, they don't necessarily, let's say somebody doesn't eat fish.
Yeah.
So that flax oil is enough to cover them for the daily.
It's enough, yeah.
Okay.
But I would still suggest, you need that DHA and EPA. But of course it depends.
But there's some people that are vegetarian, they're vegan, they don't
I understand. And it becomes a little bit tricky, just like, vegans a lot of them have problems with their B12 because it's not really found in a vegan diet and stuff. So of course there's ways around it.
Okay, well, okay.
There are ways around it.
Okay.
So that's true. But cold-pressed oil is an oil that's basically, it's used without mechanical, okay? It's not a machine. It's basically, cold-pressed means that it's used it's created using very little heat or friction.
Okay.
Basically using, similar methods that they've been using for thousands of years to make olive oil, etc. And by doing that, you're not denaturing all the good stuff that's in there.
Got it.
As soon as you start using machines and mechanical thing and the heat and the friction, it's killing the nutrients.
Okay.
So cold press basically means this is as natural as can be and as untouched and undenatured as can be. Now, I understand people with the oils because omega-6 is not necessarily coming from those oils. It's coming from common oils we use to fry and to do, so I agree with them that we don't need those oils. These oils, they tend to do more harm to us than they do good. And obviously, most people are exceeding the teaspoon to tablespoon of this oil, right? I mean, who's using, canola or sunflower oil, a teaspoon or a tablespoon? They're not, right? So now omega-9 is actually not an essential fatty acid, okay? The appellation essential fatty acid is well deserved, okay, for the omega-3 and 6, because what that means is it's essential for our well-being, and our body can't produce it, so it has to come from dietary. It has to come from the outside in. Omega-9 is actually not an essential fatty acid. It's a common misconception. People think it's 3, 6, 9. But it's really 3 and 6, okay? 9 is a different type of fat. It's not an essential fatty acid. So it's very different from 3 and 6. Our bodies can synthesize omega-9. Okay? Omega-3 and 6, our bodies can't synthesize it. We have to, put it in our bodies from a food source, from a dietary source, okay? Omega-9 is synthesized by the body.
A body produces omega-9.
Of course, you have to take in the certain foods that can make it available to be synthesized, right? Let's say with omega-3 and 6, you take whatever, flaxseed oil, walnuts, what have you. You eat it, it goes to your stomach, okay? Then it goes to your small intestine, and then the nutrients are absorbed. They're readily there to be absorbed by the body, okay? Just like if you take a vitamin, same concept.
Okay.
Omega-9, it doesn't work like that. You take it, there's nothing to be absorbed in the small intestine to turn it into what it needs. So you take in a food similar to omega-6. A lot of the omega-6 rich foods also have omega-9.
Okay.
Oils, very common, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, they have the omega-9 generally too. But you take in this food and then the body will then take from this, synthesize, and create it. People are very, very, very rarely deficient in omega-9.
In omega-9.
It's a non-issue. It's non-essential. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons, partially marketing ploys, to get people to buy their products by putting omega-9 on it. Cost them nothing. To make it,
exactly.
right? Yeah, it costs them nothing to make it, then you're paying,
I'm glad you cleared it for me because I wasn't sure about the omega-9, but thank you very much. Our time is up. Can you believe it? You'll have to come back and teach us some more.
Just one quick thing about omega-3 is that when somebody starts supplementing with omega-3, one of the first things you'll notice is hair, skin, and nails. Your hair, skin, and nails will become far healthier as short as a month. It can be anywhere from a month to a few months, depending, how deficient you are, where your levels are. But it's one of those things you notice right away. The hair, skin, and nail begin to improve rapidly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
You'll have to come back. I hope you enjoyed our show, and I will definitely make sure Shawn Schechter is back in our show.